Everyone. I wanted to do a Maxime Bernier tweet roundup, but I came across this interview and I watched it, and this question and answer stood out for me, so I wanted to show it to you. I will get to the Maxime Bernier tweet roundup. That's how we'll finish the show tonight. But first, we're going to talk about yellow vest protests. Okay, but first.
Mr. Prime Minister, given the current political climate where traditional alliances are no longer what they used to be, U.S. versus Canada on trade, the U.S. working with China, Russia, and North Korea, the Saudis coming after Canada, and now China, do you think we're witnessing the dawn of a new world order? And if so, what can Canada do to maintain the strength of democracy and traditional Western ideals?
Oh, that's a great question. What we need to do is stay true to the rules and the laws and the values that have not just served Canada well, but served the latter half of the 20th century extraordinarily well after devastating world wars, after tremendous conflict. Yes, there is a certain amount of disruption going on in the world right now, and I think one of the best things that we can do, and quite frankly, the conversations I have with leaders and citizens all around the world is, thank you, Canada, for staying strong and firm to the values we know are important to resisting sort of the populism and the divisiveness and the negativity that is injecting instability into our global system. Canadians are going to stay firm and strong and anchored in our rules and values because that's what people expect.
But even with political pressures,
I'll leave it there. I find the party line on rule of law interesting. Manny Ottawa encapsulated it in a tweet well, and I don't have that right now, that link. But rule of law applies to everybody but Justin Trudeau and his group of merry bandits in the government currently. Weird question, the weird way it was phrased. Yeah, weird. And again, the rule of law and then equating that with not voting for a populist candidate. Again, strange. Okay, so this is Global News reporting, and it was just after dinner that I saw this, and it's Macron pleads for calm as French authorities brace for more yellow vest protest. The article talks about how this is a protest against the cost of living in France. This is not a protest against the cost of living in France. This is much more than that, but I'll read the article. Here we go. French President Emmanuel Macron called Friday for calm as authorities prepared to deploy armored vehicles and thousands of security forces for a possible fifth straight weekend of violent protests on the streets of Paris. The, quote, Yellow Vest movement, which began its demonstrations November 17th, initially to protest an increase in fuel taxes, soon morphed into an expression of rage about the high cost of living in France and a sense that Macron's government is detached from the everyday struggles of the workers. Quote, our country needs calm, it needs order, it needs to function normally again, Macron said in Brussels, where he attended a European Union summit. Later, he traveled to Strasbourg to express his condolences in the eastern French city where a gunman killed 4 people and wounded a dozen more after opening fire Tuesday near a Christmas market. And they shot and killed that person. So the gas tax that they blamed it on didn't stop these protests. The continued police presence and crackdown on its own citizens on peaceful protests. And hold on a second here. I'll read you the passage that talks about the violence on peaceful protesters. Quote, police arrested more than 1,000 people in Paris last weekend and 135 people were injured, including 17 police officers. Amnesty International also urged authorities to use restraint, describing the security forces' response to the protests as, quote, extremely heavy-handed. Police used rubber bullets, sting ball grenades, and tear gas against largely peaceful protesters who did not threaten public order, and the organization has documented numerous instances of excessive use of force by police, the group said in a statement. So, not only are the militarized police responding to relatively peaceful protesters, and I realize they're overturning a car here, but also, if you're not aware of provocateurs that are hired by people who don't have France's best interest at heart to infiltrate and whip up a crowd, I suggest you do some reading about what happened at the G20 in Toronto. There were people dressed in, and I mean, these people are well documented all through the Western world at protests and stuff. They dress up in black and they get into a crowd, and it doesn't matter why the crowd is assembled. You can whip that crowd into not a frenzy, but you can get people upset, right? And it doesn't take too much because people, if you're in a crowd, typically you're talking about something charged, right? And you're protesting something or whatever. So it doesn't take much to push some people over the top. And that looks bad, and the news can report on that. This is not manufactured, but these are tactics that are used and have been well documented. So it's worth it to be aware of that. So regardless of the fact that the largely peaceful protests were met with police using rubber bullets and tear gas, there are other complicating factors to deal with. So both on the police side and the protester side. So if you do decide to go out to do this, whether you are in France or if you're in the United Kingdom or Brussels, and we'll get there in a minute, or anywhere else in the world, because this is now becoming a worldwide movement. I've heard that other people don't think we should be adopting the yellow vests or anything to that effect. I disagree. There's instant recognition and solidarity there. This is against a globalist movement, a globalist government, and they want a single unelected body to make the decisions about who goes where, when, how many, etc., etc. This is not what Canada signed up for. This is not what Canada is. And that's what the yellow jackets, the yellow vests are protesting against. They're saying the globalist nature of our government, the idea that the government can do what it wants with impunity and say, oh, we signed this document at the UN and so that makes this okay, despite the fact that thousands of people are shutting down highways and protesting all weekend, to the extent where the president of France is pleading for the French to be calm and stop the protests. That's a big deal. They being the French government, are hearing their people, and they are begging them to stop. And the people are not stopping. In fact, it's expanding. So here's Paul Joseph Watson retweet, quote, protesters wearing yellow vests similar to those worn in recent protests in France have blocked London's Westminster Bridge, bringing traffic to a standstill. And this is 4:02 a.m., so this is 9 a.m. British time on December 14th. That's today. And here's another one, 30 to 60 pro-Brexit protesters in yellow vests block Westminster Bridge with a photo. And I thought, well, we've got to see that photo. And there was video. So here's the photo. Here's the Westminster Bridge. There's the London Eye. And well, we'll watch the video here. Well, we'll not watch 5 minutes or another 30 seconds of police, but this is another tweet a few days ago in Brussels. Yellow vest, 60 arrested after Brussels rally, and the link is in the description, and a link to all this will be in my description. Here's a link to the Yellow Vest Canada, and we're on the events page, and it lists all of the current events and all across all of the provinces. So if you are interested in organizing an event, get in touch with these people. A link is in the description. If you're interested in supporting an event, well, here's the list. Here's the list of cities that are having protests this week. Here's the Maxime Bernier tweet roundup starting now. So I'm just going to go back to, well, the last one I looked at was Mr. Bernier's stance on the UN Compact on Migration, and he kind of explain that further. So we'll just go back to then. So here he is, Maxime Bernier. Quote, I ran a 106-kilometer marathon in 12 hours 5 years ago. I know what it means to, quote, still have a long way to go and how to reach the finish line. And he's responding to an article from Eric Grenier. Sorry, Eric, if I got your name wrong. Months after launching his People's Party, Maxime Bernier still has a long way to go. CBC News, yeah. Yep, there is a long way to go. But you know what? That just means there's a lot of time to perfect the message and perfect the way to beat Justin Trudeau and get the best possible leader of this great country, right? Mr. Bernier says, quote, I propose to reform the equalization formula in both languages. And he does, and it's a full 2 minutes. It's a minute and 40 seconds. You know what? We're going to listen.
Et je pense que vous êtes comme moi, vous ne voulez pas que...
I apologize. I didn't realize this is from the Quebec rally, so he's speaking exclusively in French. So I'm not going to play the whole minute and 40 seconds. I didn't listen to it before, but I didn't realize it was in French, so I apologize. We'll move on to the next clip. Maxime says, pipelines, equalization, immigration, corporate welfare, Paris Agreement, healthcare, foreign aid, supply management, etc. Who is not afraid to speak in both languages on these issues? Who offers clear principles? Who can unite our country around solutions? People's Party of Canada.ca. And it's got a quote here. It says, if we want conservative principles to win, we have to defend them openly with passion and conviction. Maxime Bernier. And the only criticism I have is the same criticism I had for the CPC. You need to finish your meme with a call to action. Share if you agree. Make Canada strong. Share to make Canada strong, or something to that effect. It costs you 60 pixels at the bottom here, and people will share, or make it at the top, or something to that effect. But you need to give people a call to action, otherwise they will do nothing. And that's just do it. Add a call to action, please. Other than that, I like the message. Moving on. Maxime Bernier says, Somali criminal crossed border illegally in Manitoba and then fooled Canadian authorities for a year. Will finally be deported, but says he's hired a lawyer and will try to come back. Liberal government cannot secure our border and yet is planning even more migration with the UN. And he's responding to a CBC Toronto article. Says this case is indicative of what we could see in similar cases in Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, across our country, said one researcher. And I showed you a article yesterday talking about the gang member who told the immigration officer, I'm a gang member, and the immigration officer said, great, you seem to be super honest, go ahead, we'll see you at your immigration hearing, probably, because we know you're going to do what you say you're going to do, because you're so honest. And then it turned out he had 8 aliases and outstanding warrants and stuff. Just awful. Okay, back to Mr. Bernier. Maxime says, incomes in poorer provinces should tend to catch up to their richer brethren. That, in fact, they haven't after 6 decades of equalization may not be coincidental. There's evidence to support the thesis that it discourages them from realizing the full potential of their economies. And this is in response to a National Post article talking. It says, Andrew Coyne, only thing equalization has spread evenly in Canada is discontent. National Post. I don't think Mr. Bernier is wrong on that one. I say yes to pipelines in both languages. I'm not going to make that mistake again. Link is in the description if you want to watch it. I'm not going to play it right now. But Maxime is making a point here in differentiating himself between the Liberals and his potential government. And there's going to be overlap with regards to the CPC, right? Pipelines are going to be a necessity going forward in Canada if we're going to be using oil to bolster our economy and to create jobs, etc. It only makes sense to use pipelines, and that brings us to, I think, the next clip. Yeah, how pipeline opponents see the issue, and you see trucks with their diesel and their fumes and stuff driving on the Trans-Canada Highway, and you've got a person in front of the pipeline, and then you've got rail cars full of oil. And the rail cars, I made a comment at some point talking about we want rolling pipelines, and that's essentially what they are. It's very dangerous, as we've had accidents in the past. It's not the best choice, and it's to put a pipeline in would be to get full value for our product, and it's a no-brainer. It's if you look at it from a business standpoint, it's an absolute no-brainer. Pipeline makes absolutely the most sense, and a pipeline east makes even more sense. Why are we spending money on foreign oil when we could be producing and refining our own oil from Alberta in eastern Canada rather than unloading tankers of Saudi oil, right? Does it not make sense to anybody else? Anyway, so thank you very much for watching. That is the end of our tweet roundup, I believe. No, one more. Maxime Bernier was announcing a St. John, New Brunswick rally, 7 p.m. on January 17th. So if you're in or around St. John and you want to check it out, there it is. The information is on peoplepartyofcanada.ca, and I'm sure it will be just as fun as all of the other rallies. I attended one in Toronto, and it was fun. Okay, thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful evening and an excellent, safe weekend.